Hi design thinkers, my name is Matthew Sear, and today we are going to be getting into Figma, building out a toggle switch component. And if you haven't seen the video I put out about building a switch, I would suggest go check that one out. Otherwise, what we're going to be doing is building our multi and our single, and we're going to be putting it into our component, and then we're going to be able to then populate, change it, and switch it out using some kind of advanced component switching under the hood. So if all these things interest you, then let's jump into the video. Alright, here we are inside of Figma. We're going to be starting to create our check input toggle. We'll continue on working with the multi and single select elements. We're going to have our main label and our support text. We're going to be covering basically the building of the button, and we're going to also make sure we have some of the user experience kind of guidelines, and we will start here. So anytime we're designing an element, let's actually think about how we're layering it, what we're making, what the different states, how are they changing over time. So when we think about it, we need that multi single switch, so they're labeled out. We also know that it has the label, it has the support text, it has the element inside of it. We may need to have enabled states, disabled states, hover states, and so on, different sizes maybe, and then we also have all of those styling elements to consider. So good place to start, just think about what's inside your asset, and that will help you structure it and layer it out in a more effective way. Now, when we are using our elements, when we're thinking about the UX guidelines here, we'll make sure that our label is nice and easy and clear. We have certain restrictions and certain controls around that. We know how we are grouping and layering our text, just having good hierarchy. And then there are elements to do with error handling, or the ways that we can handle as well if it is a required field to be entered or not required field to be entered, so on and so forth. Make sure that it's responsive for mobile, and we're always gathering feedback on our designs. So let's get started with building these offsets. So if you haven't been in the other video where we did the switch, this is the switch we have. It has a few layered parts to it. If you're basically, I'll be expanding upon it or necessarily switching out from it. But there are a couple of interesting things. The only real major things that I want to make sure that I maintain is the icon, because when I switch out from being a switch to a check, and when I switch it out from being that check to, for example, a single select, I want it to keep the same icon, and I also want it to keep the same switchover. So inside of here, we have that icon that says check. I have this thing called toggle, and this is the toggle select, and this is the element that I care to keep. And at the top here we have, it says switch, and then it has my spacer. That's fine. But what I'm gonna do, instead of calling this my switch, I will have this as my select. So now it is referred to as my select layer. And I will select the whole switch, which is my M switch, and I have it in just a simple normal frame with an auto layout. Just gonna duplicate it. I'll have this hug. With my new one, I am going to call this check. And I actually do not need the text or the icon layer. And I also don't need that spacer. And with this whole default layer at the top, I can tell that to hug. And now I can just center it into the component frame that's inside of, and we can zoom right in here. All that I need to do is that I can see that I can switch this on, I can switch that off. And I have my toggle. And what I can see is that I have this kind of styling going on. I'm going to remove the outline. When I select this, what I do want it to do is I want it to appear, and I want the check to be a white, and I want it to be filled. But I'm going to have to, of course, make the actual states for it to change into, and this is where it will have the states as well, and that will be my check on. And I don't really need anything else inside. A lot of this is layered the way that I like it to be layered, and that is pretty much good for me. What I can do now is grab my main component, this switch component here. See, I can have a lot of those variables in there. I'm going to create Shift A, add another layer, and this will be my select. Selector input. And I will create that to be a component. I will remove my padding, make sure that it is hugging. I will also use a similar kind of container. We'll remove those components inside of it. I'm just going to throw that in there. Alright, so now I have two layers. I have this element underneath and I have this element at the top. I'm going to select both these two elements, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to rename them. I'm going to put a dot, and then I'm just going to go current name, and that will rename them but add that dot in front. What happens is when you put a dot in front, it will remove those from being shared, because I don't really want that one to be shared. I just want this one to be shared, which is the selector input. And the selector input goes through the different types of selections. So now I have that. What I need to do is go to my type of selection, and I can turn that into a actual instance, and I'll say so selection type. And I clicked through that a little bit too quickly. I can go to that. Now I can actually select a different element. I have this element down the bottom, so I'll select that one. Now I have those two. So if I was to drag out from here, I can select my check. And I can switch back and forth between the two, which is really handy. Because I had this one here, I am actually going to make another one. And instead of, I'm going to actually put single. And I will put mult for multi. And I don't really need this icon here. But what I do want is for this to appear. And I want this to be a fill. And And the fill, I would like it to be like so. And I will have a stroke, which will be the white inside. And I'll have that at maybe a 4. So maybe I drop that down. That looks pretty good. And I can go up to the actual toggle select your top part. And this is why we build our components the way we do, because all I need to do is adjust it like, and it actually responds the way that I want it. And I want it to be 16 in height and width. And I'm going to drop that down back to 2, possibly. Maybe 3. Sure. We can play around with the styling and forever, but I will just leave it as that for the time being. Now I have basically my other type. I can select the main component and go to those types. I can add in the new type as well. Now I have my 3 types inside. And now I can go and I can select that other type there. And I also think that I would prefer this one to also be at that 16 pixel height. And what I can do is make sure that the check also fits the same. All I'm doing at the moment is making sure that it fills quite right. Almost done. We will just make sure that this inside also has just, there we go, just about right. Which is quite nice. What I can do for all of these is to also make sure that I switch these out. I do not care for any of those pieces that were from before. Same with this one, but I do care, of course, about that icon, but I can leave the one that is relevant. And I will leave those. So by turning this into an auto layout, and then turning this into an auto layout, and then turning this into an auto layout, I can get the elements inside to now confirm that they hug each other, or hug themselves, and that they're set to those sizes, which means that it will do this. And if I was to switch it to check, it's a check, switch it to switch, and it'll be switch, and the switch is larger, of course, so that's how it works. Now, I basically built out all of the on states here. Now, I would recommend as well possibly even building out all the states before you get this to this point. We could just do like this. We could skip that part a little bit, but just so that we can at least have a switch on and off state, I will make sure that I add in the on and off state. and this will be on. So you can use it either as on and off. Another way to do it, which I'll do down here, is true. And we will make another one, false. And all that you need to do is, of course, just switch it off. And we can grab our top section, make sure that we are now pushing the nested properties up, which is from the main components, which means that when I click this, I can access all of the elements from here. And now I can switch out from my check, and now I have access to the check stats, which I can do off. Or I can switch to my single select, and because I did true and false, it actually does the switch instead. So if you just have two, you can use true or false, and that will give you your switch. Or if you have multiple, you can use names, and that will give you your drop down. Depends on what you need, but there we go. So I switch that off. Bear in mind though, we can select off and it will break because I don't have them as the same. They're different. Because they're functioning different, they will behave differently. So just be aware, if I was to make sure that they're all the same, let's say from the switch state at the top here, besides I guess the switch state has a hide and show, you would have to make them either all hide and show, or you would have to make them different switching states. So there are all the ways you can layer and all the different kind of ways you could show on and off. But basically I've got the basics to be able to access these, switch between them. Let's just design the final piece of our component, and then we can add in the label and that. So grab our switch, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building out a portion that's there, and we're going to build out another frame that will be coming out here, which will hold our text. We're then going to inside a top section, and then we're going to have a bottom section which is going to hold our paragraph. We're going to be using frames so we can control the height, size, and how it scales to layer these areas. So let's call this my header or header label section. The reason why we're doing this is because we would like to limit the actual amount of text that can be inside the label section, and I don't want the actual height of that section to change. But what I do want is the paragraph helper text section. I do want that to change. I want to enable them to have multi-lines, and I could also look at limiting that as well. So that could be an option, or I could set a portion at a minimum height and then allow them to scale. There's so many different ways you can do this, but I will allow for this one to basically scale on the vertical axis. All right, so this will be the support text section. There we go. And what I can do is, instead of going using that, I'll just grab both these two frames, stick them together. This will be the text section. And what I can do, I'll remove that, of course, and I'm going to make this a fixed height. I'll say 48, and I will grab just a text piece. I'm going to say label. So there we go. And I'm going to select my 16 text medium. I will make sure that my actual text itself is hugging, and I'm just going to go drag that into here. I'm going to select my top section, go down to the next layer, make sure that I am using my internal color. And let's go, at the moment I'm using my 8, and then I got my 5 outline. So when I enable it to be filled like this, I could select the sections, and if I did a container around it, it would allow me individual selection, which is handy. I'm thinking about it a little bit more, and I might not allow for the color. So I need also this section, which will do a similar layout to here. And what I need to do is copy and paste that. I'm going to crunch this in, make sure that these fill. I will remove that label text. And as you can see, I do have a set of actual width for this one. So if I was to basically create a container around it, and let's just say that I want to give it potentially 16 padding on all sides, or let's say I give it 8 padding on the internal, because I do want it to be closer to that label. I would be looking at basically a width of 7.2. So how about I will fix my width to 7.2 just for the time being. I will make the parent container of this area, hug that, and then I want this element to push and fill the container. And I will just say this is my filler section. And I will just add, I actually might just say fill, and then I'll get it down. I'm going to chuck in a little emoji into here, and I'm going to select my arrows, and I'm just going to say that it fills. So just so it knows that it fills from top to bottom. So I can now set this section into an auto layout, which, sorry, it's already an auto layout. It's anchored at the top, so that's good. And I'm happy to also make that an auto, and I'm happy to also make that an auto. I'm going to actually grab my switch, and I'm going to throw that one in, and I will put this as my selector. Because I've already had these names, and I'm just duplicating the same layer stacks, I'm only adjusting the name component that's it's relevant for. And now I got this, and I can select both of those, put them both into an auto layout, and this is going to be my actual final toggle switch. All right. I think, did I call it? Oh, check input toggle. Sure. We'll call it a check input toggle. There we go. Check input toggle. Now, this section itself can actually be colored. So we will pick our 8 and I will give it the 5 outline. I will use 24 and I can see that this is just hanging in there. I will go auto layout. I will go. Also, I need to make this an auto layout, and then I don't have any content at the moment in there. I will make sure that they fill from left to right. The parent needs to define the height, but I do hug from top to bottom. And I'm going to remove any of that padding. I did say that I would like to set this maybe 48. Oh, 16. 8. And I'll give the height. I'll actually use locked heights here. So using a locked height means that they will stay roughly around the same height, and because they're in an auto layout, I can actually just remove those elements. I can do the 8, but I can tell this to be centered, so it'll be centered there, and it will have the 8, and I'll make the 16 and this is where you end up just needing to design and just figure out where and what and how you think this should all basically be laid out. I am starting to think that I need to have a height of... I can select this, center it. I'm going to keep it leftmost aligned but centered, so that it will always be in line there, but it will fit with inside this container, which is great. And then I don't really mind about that cut, but what I do care about is I do not want it to be basically pushing there. I will have this fill, but I will also tell it that it will cut off. So if I was to select this whole frame, I want to make it fill this container. Ideally, it would hit to that point, but it will cut off and it won't break line, which is perfect. And then all I need is my next piece. This is going to be the actual label content. I don't want any of that. What I do want though is that this label to be a 14, and I'll probably go 14 and a regular. It's not as relevant, but it is It is needed, but I can drop that down though. And let's... So I wouldn't mind these both to sit together. So what this might need is for me to actually tell the content to sit to the bottom. But what I can say is if you're sitting down at the bottom, I can make it have that 8 pixel bump from the bottom. Which means that I don't need to have as high of a frame to lock it at. 48. 48. The reason why I'm making these actually the way it is and it's fixed, and I'm not going ahead and just putting them around and anchoring them, it just means that they're all going to scale and they're all going to sit in a grid, and they're going to be able to stretch and squash and still keep the same appropriate ratios. Because these are fixed heights, they will always be like this. But this, down the bottom here, hugs the text, and this frame hugs this whole piece. And then now I can make sure that this frame will always fill. I don't need any of that. And this frame also hugs all of this. What I might do though is just grab, I always find you have to do that. And fill. Fill. So now this frame hugs all the content. This text will fill. I will make sure that inside the text frame, like I had the 16 there, I'll also make sure that there is the 16 pixels there. And now, if I was to continue cascading down, of course, as long as I have that hugging, it will push the element going down, which is perfect. And just for the last little touch, I will also add 8 pixels there. So I define this. And there's my text. I'm going to just add in some random Laurel Lepson. And we only need something to maybe 28 characters long. There we go. Cool. So we got that. Our text comes across, it fills, it's all responsive, which is fantastic. Basically, just turn that into a component. There we go. And I can add some properties. I can add my nested element. And from here, I can add my label, this, which is called my label. And what I will do, this is meant to be my supportive text. So I'll just copy that. Make sure that's called supportive text. That's called label. And now I can create this. This can be support text. So if I was to duplicate this section out, I now have access to switch out the type that I have. And as you can see, it will push in and allow me to change that around. And I can switch it to this. And there we go. Basically, from here you pretty much got your own adaptive kind of responsive element. And from here you can pretty much adjust the main asset however you like. If you do want, you could do 16. You could instead make it hug, and all you would need to do is just respond by putting that as a 16 and then also making that hug. And that all you would need is to make sure that your text itself remains at the same height of these changing components. So if, let's say this was 20, I could either switch out my switch to be that height instead, which would mean that I would simply adjust the fixed element to 20 instead. And that is pretty much all it is to it. We can play around with all of our styling until we have exactly what we are looking for. I'm not sure why. Oh, that's because that needs to be also 20. There we go. Done. Because I have the same height, that will also make sure that matches up perfectly with my switch. And I can simply go into here, chuck in toggle, go into here, chuck in my check, and I can switch that on and off, switch that on and off, so on and so forth. And that's how we can basically build in our whole kind of switching out toggle select element. And we can take this further. If you other elements that we'll get into, if we were to take this further, would be to layer it into the different states. So enable, disable, hover, and focus. And that one is where we take this asset, and all we will do is create those alternate states out. And then all you'll do is you'll create your styling. So we've got our states. And I will set this to be, because I'm doing a dark mode, I will set that to be a darker color. I will take those whites and to 200 and knock that to 250. And I will take the color out of this by dropping this to 5, 7, and 6, and There we go. And for example, when you've ended up adjusting and changing the styling, it will do its best to make sure that it maintains that styling across your other elements. Bear in mind, anything that is hiding and showing, for example, like this icon here, will still remain as a white. And that means that when you are changing styling and the elements do cross over, for example, the switch does have this asset inside here, but it's hidden. If you make sure that you are setting it appropriately, let's say we set it to be the styling of a check on in here as the purple, but let's say I go into here and I make sure that if you're disabled, although I have it hidden, that it is the gray. We should be able to switch in and use the, oh yep, oh, set the background as the gray. That is not what I wanted the icon to be gray. There we go. Reset. And there we go. And that's what will happen. So as long as you keep similar naming conventions, you create all your different styling, you layer your assets together, you have consistent names across your different switched components, you'll be able to swap and change out those sections into any of your assets and then create layered components like this one. I hope that this video has been helpful. Please let me know in the comment section below. But until next time, design thinkers, keep thinking, keep building amazing designs, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you.